We really need to talk about something that's happening inside your mind, probably right now, that might be causing way more damage than you could ever imagine. It's a pattern almost all of us have, and it's so common we just, mistake it for part of our personality. But the science is starting to catch up, and what it's showing us is, frankly, it's alarming.
So, just for a second, as you're listening to me, there's a really high chance your brain isn't just focused on this. It's probably multitasking in the background, running a whole other hidden program that's, well, it's pretty destructive.
Sound familiar? Maybe it's replaying some conversation from last week, just picking apart every single word, trying to find a different way it could have gone. And at the same time, it's planning out 5 different versions of the future that are probably never going to happen. Oh, and just for fun, it's also digging up something you did 3 years ago and telling you how you messed it up. All of this happening at once, like a computer with 100 tabs open. And the fan is screaming. Now, most of us would just shake our heads and call this thinking too much or being a worrier. But here's the thing. What if it's not a personality quirk at all? From a neurological perspective, this isn't just a bad habit. It's a biological state of alarm. To a neuroscientist, this chronic pattern is the start of a genuine medical emergency, a slow-motion crisis that's unfolding inside your brain. To really get what this looks like on the ground, let's talk about a character profile. We're going to call this person Alex. And Alex might be someone you know, or, maybe Alex is the person you see in the mirror. So on the outside, Alex is the person everyone praises. Friends, coworkers, they all say, wow, Alex is so thoughtful, so prepared. They're the one who's already analyzed every single possible outcome of a project. And in our culture, we reward that, right? We see that kind of intense thinking as a sign of intelligence, of being conscientious. It's almost treated like a superpower. But what's the internal reality? What's going on behind the scenes? Well, Alex hasn't had a full night of deep, restful sleep in 2 years because their brain just will not shut down. And that constant mental grinding has a massive cost. Something as simple as deciding what to eat for dinner can feel completely paralyzing. That's not just being indecisive. There's a name for it: decision fatigue. The brain's capacity to make one more choice has been totally exhausted.
So, what's the diagnosis here? If we step away from the story and look at the actual science, we get a really clear and honestly startling picture of what is happening inside an overthinking brain. And I want to be clear, this isn't just about feelings. This is about physiology.
The clinical term for this is psychological rumination, and it is not productive problem solving. It's a stuck, negative thought loop. The best way to think about it is like a car spinning its wheels in the mud. You get a ton of noise, a lot of engine strain, a lot of heat, but zero forward movement. This exact pattern is a core symptom and in many cases a driver of anxiety, depression, and even OCD.
Okay, and this is a really important distinction to make. The cognitive loop we're talking about, psychological rumination, has nothing to do with rumination syndrome. That's a completely different physiological disorder that involves food. What we're focusing on here is purely cognitive, that relentless, exhausting spin cycle of thoughts. So when your brain is stuck in that ruminating loop, it literally cannot tell the difference between a threat you're just thinking about and a tiger that's actually chasing you. It sees this constant internal noise as a real danger, and that keeps your body's stress response system permanently flipped to the on position, which means your brain is getting a constant, unhealthy flood of a very powerful chemical, cortisol.
You've probably heard of cortisol. It's the stress hormone. And in short bursts, it's great. It saves your life. It gives you the focus and energy you need to deal with a problem right now. But when rumination keeps that cortisol tap wide open 24/7, it actually becomes toxic to your neurons. Think of it like a slow-acting acid rain constantly dripping on the delicate structures of your brain. And there's one area that is especially vulnerable to this chemical downpour. That area is the hippocampus. Just think of the hippocampus as your brain's master filing cabinet. It's in charge of creating new memories, organizing them neatly, and pulling them up when you need them. But it also has another huge job. It helps regulate your emotions. It's the part of the brain that's supposed to look at the alarm system and say, hey, calm down. We've seen this before. It's not a real threat. Stand down. And this is where a truly devastating cascade begins. First, the chronic rumination triggers that constant release of cortisol. Second, these high levels of cortisol are directly toxic to the cells in your hippocampus. Third, the neurons and all their little connections, the very wiring for your memories and emotional controls, they start to wither. The scientific term is functional atrophy. And finally, the hippocampus physically shrinks.
This isn't theoretical. Studies show people with chronic stress have smaller hippocampus. And when that happens, memory gets worse, emotional control goes out the window, and critically, its ability to shut off the stress response gets weaker, which, of course, creates an even more vicious cycle. And that right there brings us to the central dark paradox of overthinking. This is the neurological trap that so many of us fall into. The very tool you think you're using to solve your anxiety is actually the thing that's building and reinforcing it, brick by brick. So this forces you to ask a really fundamental question about what's going on in your own head. When your mind is racing, are you actually solving a problem? Or are you just reliving it over and over, making it even more powerful each time? See, here's the flaw in our wiring, the trick the brain plays on itself. It mistakes the repetition of a problem for progress on a problem. It burns so much energy just thinking the thought that it creates this illusion that you're doing productive work. But you're not getting any closer to a solution. You're just digging the trench of that problem deeper and deeper into your brain. Here's exactly how that anxiety loop gets built. It starts with a trigger, a worry, a memory. Then your amygdala, the brain's little alarm bell, fires off an anxiety response. To get rid of that awful feeling, you start to ruminate, to think it through. But here's the trap. Focusing so intensely on it signals to your brain that this threat is very real and very important. And that reinforces the connection between the trigger and the fear, making the whole loop stronger and faster next time. You are literally practicing and getting better at being anxious. And believe it or not, it gets even more physical than that. Research has shown that chronic stress can actually change what your brain's own stem cells produce. Instead of making new neurons, they start producing more of the stuff that insulates neural connections, called white matter. What this does is essentially build a superhighway for anxiety, literally hardwiring that response into the physical structure of your brain, making it the default path. Okay, so that was the diagnosis, and I know that is a lot. It's heavy. But the most important part of any diagnosis is the prescription. Because your brain is neuroplastic, it can change. None of this has to be permanent. This trap has an exit. So how do we break the loop? First, we have to accept one fundamental truth. You cannot outthink a problem that is being created by thinking. That's like trying to put out a fire with gasoline. The goal isn't to find the perfect thought to fix it. The goal is just to get out of the loop itself. You have to interrupt the pattern. So here is the first practical step. It is so simple, but that doesn't mean it's easy. The very next time you feel that familiar pull, that spiral starting up, just stop and say out loud with your actual voice, "I notice my brain is looping." That's it. That is the entire instruction. So why on earth does something so simple actually work? Well, it's a core idea from cognitive behavioral therapy. When you say it out loud, you create a little bit of space between you, your conscious self, and the thought. Suddenly, you are not in the loop anymore, you are watching it. By naming the pattern, you take away its automatic, invisible power. And this is so important. It's an act of self-awareness, not self-criticism. You're not saying, "I'm bad for doing this." You're just calmly stating, "Oh, look, that's what's happening." And this brings us to what might be the most important takeaway from all of this. If this is your pattern, you are not broken. You are not weak. In fact, this tendency often comes from a place of brilliance and incredible sensitivity. Your brain is a world-class analysis engine. The only problem is that nobody ever taught it that it's allowed to rest. No one ever installed an off switch for that problem-solving mode it runs so well. So I want to leave you with one final question. Your brain uses about 20% of all the energy your body consumes. Just imagine for a moment all of the power, all of that brilliant energy that your brain is currently pouring into these draining, destructive thought loops. What could you create? What problems could you actually solve? Who could you be if all of that energy was finally free to be used for something else?